Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If you're joining for the first time, I'm Rachel. It's great to meet you. If this is your first Hangout today, this is an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership and questions you're facing, and really just what's going on in the world of data science. The sessions are recorded and shared to YouTube as well as the RStudio Data Science Hangout site. So you can always go back and rewatch them and find helpful resources. We do also have a LinkedIn group too for the Hangout. So if you ever want to continue a certain discussion or meet people there or see a brief summary of a topic brought up each week, you can do so. Someone from the team can share that in the chat now. Otherwise, I'll share it in just a moment. But I do want to just say, I can't believe it's almost July, and wanted to let everyone know that we will be taking a bit of a break from the Hangouts in July, just in July only, as we prepare for the RStudio conference and some big announcements. But we'll be back on Thursday, August 4th as well. I realize I hadn't been mentioning that to people, so just want to let everybody know. Anyways, we are excited to see you all here and always want to create spaces where everybody can participate. So as you know, the Hangouts are all audience-led. So there's 3 ways that you can ask questions today. You can jump in by raising your hand on Zoom. You can put questions in the Zoom chat and just put a little star next to your question if you want me to read it out loud instead, or else I could just call on you to jump in. And then lastly, we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. And our team will share that in the chat in just a second here. Love to reiterate here, we love to hear from everyone, no matter your level of experience or area of work or industry. But with all of that, welcome. I'm excited to be joined by my co-host for today, Alec Campanini. And Alec, you have a very long title here, so hopefully I don't mess it up, but Senior Manager, Omni Merch Ops Innovation, Assortment and Space Analytics at Walmart. So you're definitely going to have to describe that for us too. But yeah. Alec, I'd love to kick it off with having you introduce yourself and share a little bit about the work that you do.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Alec Campanini. Like you said, I'm working with Walmart. I've been at the store side of Walmart for like 3 years, back when I was in college. Went off, did some master's stuff, and then now I'm back at Walmart for the past, I think 2.5 years now. I'm working inside the merchandising area specifically, looking at optimizing our assortment and making really large bulk changes in strategy for our assortment. This tends to happen, it's omni-channel, so every single channel you can think of, even drone delivery right now. We've started trying to figure out how we can place assortment in certain areas, what all's available, what's going to make the most money, et cetera. As well as like this digs into like supplier, so supply chain comes into it. But most of it is like, it's strategy based around innovation, merch products. We build a lot of products for 3,500 merchants in order to get those bulk changes made, as well as reviewed. And so we have a really big kind of like feedback community for the type of work that I do. So.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to kick off with this question here, but what's something that you're most excited about in data science in the year ahead?
I've really enjoyed the flexibility of things that are coming out. I mean, RStudio's done a good job of enabling a lot of that within inside of Walmart. So we actually have the team suite. So we utilize that to make sure that we can actually share a lot of our stuff across different teams, as well as have an easy, one-for-one deployment method for all of our Shiny apps. So I guess in like the next year, what I'd really like to see, at least at Walmart anyways, it's just how my mind's turning, is our side is flexibility around data engineering, especially as we scale and change channels, as well as being able to actually model that in a meaningful way. So for us, it's going to be flexibility in the next year or two. So.
Awesome. I know I see quite a bit on LinkedIn about some of the Shiny apps that you create at Walmart, and would love to just hear a little bit about some of those and how they help impact the business, just while we're waiting for some questions to come in from everyone else
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think this will probably spur some questions, especially since it has to deal with other retailers. My main scope right now is called rest of market. And so what we're trying to do is find out every item that exists in the rest of the market, no matter if it's in the store, online, through TikTok trends, social listening, whatever it may be. And it's really cool that I got it started out as my first project because the scope is pretty unlimited. Because you've got like Walmart as its business, and then I get to take on like rest of market as kind of its own business. So today I own a Shiny application that is pushed to all merchandising. We have, I think, a little bit over 12,000 uses on it today across all of the merchants and merch ops. And what it does is, starting with ecom, which is our first version, was insights on about 28 to 30 different retailers in the e-commerce space. You can guess as to who those may be. With many items at the item level, a lot of different contracted data sets that are coming in. So they all come in different grains and forms. And then the biggest thing is just to normalize all of those to the Walmart hierarchy. So we got to have some way to tell a merchant that something from the rest of the market on a different website makes sense for them to look at. So we do a lot of data normalization. We do a lot of trend analytics for them. And then a lot of that afterwards comes to how much can we scrape and acquire to enhance our data. So we have a lot of market share data, a lot of sales information, pricing over time, and then a lot of the bestseller trends that are popping up. So we do a lot of things to find out where, I guess, merchants would be lacking inside of a brand, especially national brands. And then we allow a workflow to, quickly identify, oh, we're only at 60% of this brand. Drill in, what are the top items being sold? Do I want stable items? Do I want trending items? Do I want something else that I've never seen before? Or is it just that I have the item and I just need to increase, what I'm giving to the customer? Do I need to lower my price? Is it shipping too slow for somebody? Did we mess up the website? The Amazon maybe has 10 images and we have 5 for whatever reason. So it just keeps going and going. But that's my first Shiny application. It's been alive for about a year and a half now.
That's cool. What's an example of something that's like a TikTok trend that influenced a brand?
So TikTok is pretty new for us. We actually haven't engineered that fully into the Shiny app today. That's social listening that we're wanting to bring in. We're thinking about how we want to utilize that. It's obviously going to be based on hashtags that are trending throughout wherever, but we have to try to parse out a lot of that for what is product based versus just what else is actually just floating out inside of TikTok. But I think the coolest trend is on Father's Day, we released a line of new golf tech products. And all of that actually did come from my app. So we had a lot of the sports and fitness merchants find out that online, we actually sell a lot more technology rather than golf balls. So these are merchants that used to be in the store. They're setting a mod once a year. We're always going to have golf balls on the shelf because we sell all of them all the time. It's a physical asset. But they get into the e-commerce space as a new merchant for like Omni and then think that it's the same type of trend. They find a different trend inside of our app. And then I think they launched a whole slew of things this past week. So that was really cool.
That's great. Thanks, Alec. Libby, I see you asked a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll even turn on my video. Yeah, I was wondering if when you're looking at the value of a product within a SKU catalog for a brand, like, do you incorporate reviews, the number of reviews, the quality of reviews, the percentage rating, stuff like that when you're trying to figure out what's worth pulling over?
Yeah, sadly, we haven't gotten into like sentiment analysis on those reviews. We're just because of the scale of it online. I think Amazon sells like 800 million products. And so we're just looking to acquire those in the first place, much less the reviews. But we do bring in counts of ratings and reviews, and we try to track those over time. So it depends on, we really scrape like what we find in the market is the most important. So we do have sales performance on a lot of these items for the past 4 years. Some of that's acquired, some of that's paid for. But we try to track as much as we can for those that trend. So
awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Harsh, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Hey, hello everyone. Actually, I wanted to ask, like these days in the Walmart, people in Amazon do false reviews also, like related to the paid reviews. So how do you segregate between the paid reviews and the genuine reviews you are getting from the customer? Like, what is your strategies in that?
Yeah, that's well, that's one thing we haven't got to. Like I said, there's the sentiment analysis, but that does affect our counts. Another thing that affects counts just like that is duplicate listings online. So Walmart does a bad job of taking marketplace sellers and making them put it all underneath one item space. And so we even have duplicate listings of like how big our assortment is. Same thing happens on Amazon. Same thing happens on reviews, ratings, counts. And that's kind of the cool part of rest of market is that it's not even our internal data and we have to figure out some way to deduplicate it. So we have different methods for doing that internally, and then we have different methods for doing that externally. A lot of it is kind of based on different data sets we have. So if we see that one data set is an outlier for a brand's depth for Amazon, then we may treat the other three that we have engineered as more of the source of truth. But it just becomes weighting at that point. We also take, like I said, a lot of merchant feedback. So if we feel like there are misguided outputs being shown to a merchant, we allow them to edit a category. If we predicted it to their space and it's incorrect, we allow them to edit like items that we have mapped for it, which helps us understand if we're meeting customer needs. Almost all of these metrics are editable and we'll save and push it back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think 800 million products is really hard to imagine. And I'm curious, how do you handle all that data, or what does that look like at Walmart?
It comes down to prioritization. So like I said, there's really only probably 5 to 10 million that we actually care about at Amazon. Same thing happens at Walmart. We have 250 million, I think, and you don't even sell all of those. So we're really looking for sales samples and paid things within the market. We'll actually have receipt-based samples come in from different households across the market. We'll pay for that, figure out what's actually making sense. We may miss some items that way, but we typically know what's in the head and the torso pretty well. It doesn't tell us like total market value of an item, and that's where we start doing rest of market estimates at the item level. We'll predict what the market demand is, and then we're working on predicting what the Walmart demand is, even if it's not always the same, not the same customer base. So
I see a few people asked the question on Slido anonymously, and one was, has Walmart's relatively new subscription service impacted your work?
yes. So we actually break out sales samples for first party and third party subscription and non-subscription sales. And so this helps mainly inside of the pets area. Obviously, there's a lot of different models that you can offer for renewable things for life. So that makes sense. But yeah, we're trying to identify trending subscriptions, downtrending subscriptions, most paid for, most stable over time, anything you think of about subscriptions. So another thing that plays into that, just to piggyback off of it, is services. So Amazon offers a lot of installation services and stuff, right? Whenever you buy a product, Walmart has a few of those, but we're also trying to match and compete on services.
Interesting. Seth, I see you put a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. Long time no see. Alec, thanks for taking the time. So you mentioned kind of like these dual listings and things like that. And I'm sure all of us have experienced this thing where, especially when you're trying to do analysis on like products or whatever, there's a lot of coordination that is required from like, let's say the front end development or back end development that makes maybe the data ingestion and data analysis much easier. And I'm wondering if communication on like, hey, like maybe if we didn't orient these things to be two items, that would make our lives a little bit easier and kind of improve our analytical capabilities. Does that kind of communication exist?
Yeah, it's starting up a little bit more nowadays. We have good documentation on the approaches that we've tried with deduplication. So the issue with Walmart is always scale and the different types of businesses within that scale. Like on the store side, you wish everything would operate sort of the same. Like if you're Ace Hardware, you've got hardware, but we've got hardware and pets and everything all inside the same place. And so typically for, some type of flexible approach, deciles are typically good, or percentiles. Scrape everything out from the bottom 1 percentile, and that's typically your outliers. But to actually, I think, move that throughout the organization, we're doing this for ourselves right now at assortment. My now strategy that this has been used so much, and there's the business impact already there, is we push our data sets up. We're wanting to actually get rest of market items duplicated into our catalog, like our catalog. And so even if we have unmanaged records that aren't fully complete, like we don't have a unique identifier for it, or we're still missing size or dimensions, we'll have a record there, but it'll be a much quicker setup the next time the item actually comes up for the merchant to put in our space. That should help with some deduplication. There's still a lot of data science and guessing that goes on behind the scenes, but we're trying to make sure that it gets standardized for everybody.
Cool, thanks for that answer.
I see someone else had asked on Slido, going back to when you were talking about tracking prices, how do you actually track prices on Amazon or from other competitors?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. There's batch loads that we'll get monthly, like I said, from different data contracts. So we can actually see the receipt-based price. So the thing that somebody actually paid for at that time, you won't know daily. That's a price over the month. And so we do have to take stats from it, either normally median, just in case pricing goes wonky on something. So we get some type of batch load. It's a little bit lagged, but we also do a lot of the, Amazon posts their bestsellers. We post our bestsellers. You really just want to focus in on like what the top items are trending on their page at that time, and they refresh it. So I mean, we refresh ours, I think 2 to 3 times a day. They do theirs 3 to 4 times a day, I believe. And you can consistently, if it's still on that same list, check pricing as it goes throughout the day. One issue is zip code related pricing. So if you go to Amazon, I can go check it now. One of y'all can go check it. We see different pricing for shipping or whatever it may be, different ship speed. And that's a whole different ballgame that we still have to get into. How could we get all this data, not even just at scale of 800 million, but 800 million by zip code and region? And that's something that I actually haven't even dug into yet. So.
That's cool. When you say like the receipt scans, is that sometimes like those apps that give you like money back for scanning your receipt, or I was always curious.
Actually don't know. Yeah, I actually don't know the whole process for it. I don't think our vendors are going to let us know the complete story behind it. But in essence, all I really know is that there's millions of households. It's not really just like people based, it's a household based. And they would pay them X amount of money to do this service for them for a certain amount of time. So they'll sign a contract to be part of the household review. I think for a year, 2 years, whatever it may be. And that's just so that we keep it a steady sample. Customer shoppers and insights kind of stay relatively the same. It's spread out everywhere where we want inside the region, and then we just kind of aggregate and predict from there.
Cool, thank you. Libby, I see you had another question in the chat. I want to jump in.
Sure. Yeah, it looks like Brittany and I have a similar question. When you are looking at all market stuff, I feel like that's a really big struggle. You have to use external data, and it's something that everybody who has a product or service in a market deals with. So is there a vetting process that you go through to like vet external data? Do you get a sample of it and get to use it and then decide whether or not you want to purchase it? Do you validate reliability of the data, stuff like that?
So luckily enough, we actually have another team that takes on a lot of our data acquisition as a service. So y'all have heard of Nielsen, you've heard of probably 1010 or NPD or all of these main data contractors. Some of those are really easy and reliable. Like Nielsen's kind of vetted throughout the market already. But once it gets into smaller players, we actually do have a team that goes out. Since we already have 3 to 4 data sources already standardized into the Walmart hierarchy, we can kind of guess numbers. You get a new one, you check it up against those numbers. Hey, something was wonky. Go back and forth between who the vendor is, see what the differences are. Maybe their assumptions make sense, and there's a reason why something doesn't line up perfectly. After that, we just kind of use it. You just have to see with a merchant if there's any issues for their area. Are they missing data? Does it seem like something is being assigned incorrectly? It's a long process, but luckily, since we do have a team that does that before it reaches me, I can at least use it in the terms that I know that merchants are happy with it. So,
do you have any, as a follow-up, do you have any scope into like ROI for those purchases? Like, is that something that you guys have to deliver on? Like, we bought all this external data, here's what we did with it, and here's why it was worth it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's been an ongoing conversation the moment I said the word shiny app. So because what happened first is there's a guy named Peter Cross. He's left Walmart, but he was great. He stood up our entire infrastructure for our studio within Walmart. And luckily enough, I got to piggyback on that, even though I wasn't on his team. So he gave me a license. I got to deploy some of my work, start doing some testing, and as a POC, put rest of market out there. And then whenever it was announced that Peter was leaving, our studio was kind of like falling by the wayside for any of the teams. So we picked it up. The moment I said I needed to pick it up for funding was the moment we needed to do ROI analysis and figure out what it was actually going to do. And even at that time, that was only when we used one data set for e-commerce. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that people knew that there's impact there. And so I think it's about every 3 months now, we bring all the merchants that have had success stories and they demo their success stories for the other merchants. So this will go out to the VPs of their leadership. There's thousands of people on the call, or at least thousands invited. We see who shows up. But the merchants will get information from other merchants that makes them trust the source more, and maybe dig into their e-commerce space a little bit more. But my next release will be a lot larger. So we're thinking as we add things on, we want to keep showing them what the benefit is. It's a little bit hard to track perfectly in numbers because there's a lot going on. Like it's not even just about the business impact. It's really that we're also doing all these standardization and modeling practices that were never there in the first place. It's valuing each piece of that. So
that's awesome. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
Brittany, I know you had a similar question, so I wanted to see if you had anything else you wanted to add to that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I guess maybe something else to add there is because you have another team that does a lot of that data procurement, do you ever work cross-functionally with them to like help them in learning what kinds of data sets you need, what like specifically you're using it for, and sort of helping them in making sure that they're procuring the right types of data?
Yes, yeah. It's so they actually, their use case originally was market share data. So they wanted to understand Walmart versus Amazon, what's the market share just in general, and then be able to break it out by our divisions and then break it out by department. And so they're actually starting at top level, acquire as much data as possible, model it out, make sure financially it's something that they can give to leadership for true insights. And then they just keep breaking down. I started the opposite way. I started with all those same data sets, but at the item level, because we're an assortment, we predict out to the certain departments, roll up, and then eventually we're working on meshing all of our stuff together. So it should be a full up and down roll up through everything Walmart. So we're making sure that our modeling stuff stays in place correctly, because if we predict items in one area and they're saying it goes to a whole different area, we're not going to show the same numbers. So a lot of that does go on. It's more like a monthly cadence, but we make sure that we're aligned.
Awesome. When you were talking about like going through that process of showing the ROI of some of the shiny apps, I'd love to like hear how you go through that process, because sometimes I find it hard to take the time to step back away from like your everyday work to say like, hey, this is the ROI of all of my projects.
Yeah. How do I say that? So for me, it's a little bit easier just to sit down with my boss, since he's been in the business a lot longer than I have, and he understands where things are going to fit eventually. So when Rest of Market came to me, I assumed that it was just a POC. We're putting a dashboard up, one data set. we've never had e-commerce sales shown to somebody be done with it. But he understands the next 6 or 7 steps that could happen. So I'll normally just get on a call with him, ask him, vague topic, what I'm thinking, maybe give him 2 or 3 bullet points, and then we go through and edit, list out everything that we can always find, either data process, data engineering, insights, or value-wise for the merchant. And then after that, it's just like a one-time thing. We don't consistently update it. It really is ad hoc at this point. But we're trying to get to more of a framework for analyzing that later on. So I know I've asked some people on LinkedIn. That was a LinkedIn post to everybody, by the way. I think I sent it to our statistical LinkedIn group. But yeah, it's pretty difficult whenever you don't know exactly what all's been launched either from a merchant, just because our systems aren't perfectly tied. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. It just reminded me of that LinkedIn post too. And maybe that'd be something good to open up to the audience here too. But I know that post was around like, how do you show the value of Shiny over business intelligence tools as well when your team is already paying for multiple things? So yeah, I'd love to hear like what you learned through that, but also open it up to other people who have maybe had to have a similar conversation.
Yeah, at least, yes, if anybody has anything, step in, but at least in my experience with the BI tool conversation, we've at least made our point on maybe 8 to 10 things about why we would have to pick Shiny over a different BI tool. The first one really is just that we have a lot of people on our team that use R, so the skill set's there. That's a pretty good use case. The second one is just that drag and drop is pretty hard to document steps between each other. So if something breaks and somebody else needs to fix your visualization, you can't just read through some ggplot steps or Plotly or whatever it may be and recreate it. You're typically Googling in a forum somewhere and then hoping that somebody put a screenshot of every button they clicked. So, or a video or something. So that's a little bit more difficult. And then number 3 are scale. Most data models, especially like Power BI data models, don't typically handle a lot of scale. I know there's some data warehouse and data mart stuff that they're doing recently. I haven't checked it out yet. Tableau, it can connect to BigQuery or something, which is cool. But the processing and then Tableau data extracts it's just not enough for the amount of assortment we deal with. So, when we think about historical assortment at Walmart, it's 250 million today. For if you need 2 years of analysis, by day, and that's just for the items. You haven't joined in performance metrics yet. So typically we have to deal with staging batch analysis, put it inside of BigQuery, expose it in Shiny, and then go forward. So.
Cool, thank you. If other people have thoughts too or things to share, feel free to raise your hand here. Yes, up. Just a little bit of data. Yeah, millions and millions.
Yeah.
I guess if there's no question, this was great in terms of understanding a lot of the process of how Walmart works, but what are the things, I guess, that you guys are looking towards in the future to that excites you, both technically or otherwise?
Yeah, so I think the social listening piece is going to be really cool. I'd like to get into more data sources. So one thing that we've learned is that Google search and Google Trends are normally a pre-indicator of sales inside of the market. It's a really good lead signal. And so the first thing that we've done is at a brand level, you can drill in from our app into Google Trends, and so you can click up to 5 trends. That's their limitation, but it allows you to find a lot of the search results that are trending in the market, the geography of that, and then what the top results are over time, as well as check brands just against each other. And so that was impactful already enough for a merchant because they could see, oh, Timberland's trending up, what's going on? And there was some collaboration of Timberland and some designer. And then maybe they want to try to get in on marketing on that or whatever it may be. And so that was cool enough, much less getting into TikTok, Like to Know It, all these different apps that nobody's really we've never sourced it at Walmart before. or if we have, it's for specific one-off things that we may do in marketing. And so now this is really our group tying into marketing. And I don't know, we're here kind of siloed. We're giving everybody cool stuff, but I want to be with catalog, marketing, data science, data engineering, and then push it all back out so that our systems can utilize a little bit more. I think that's probably the biggest excitement at Walmart right now.
That's amazing. I see there's a question on Slido too that was, how are you able to connect the Shiny apps in R with your internal database information systems?
Yeah. So I just use ODBC drivers through RStudio. They have professional drivers for BigQuery. They don't have one, I think, for Presto, which is where we have a lot of our layers kind of thrown out there from GCP. So we have our own Presto connector that we use. I think there's the R Presto Shiny Power R package that you can use for connecting. But most of it's ODBC. We used to use JDBC, but we recently converted over. And then I'll use like the database like pool package to make sure that connections stay on and revolving through BigQuery, because there is timeout stuff. But yeah, I'll just connect through BigQuery and that. I'll use dbplyr either inside of the back end of Shiny or for development of a SQL query just to get a flow down. And then me and my coworker usually work together if we need to use like Python's API to optimize it. So.
Great. I was just curious. So I know this is a tool that you provide to the merchants as well. So is this something that's like greatly improved their experience of working with Walmart? Or I'm just trying to like put myself in the shoes of who's using the Shiny app.
Honestly, I think at this point, it doesn't help them process wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the whole point about connecting to these systems, is to actually improve their processes with the data now that we actually know what they need and what insights they're going for and where else we can build. Right now it's honestly probably more work, because they come to our app, they find insights, and then they've got to actually execute and do something to it. And in the e-commerce space, that's typically always at bulk, unless we're putting aside of something specific in our fulfillment center. So that it's probably harder actually for them right now, because they need to drill in to understand what their gap is. There's predictions to their category, so it could be incorrect, so they're giving us feedback. We have items mapped to it that are anywhere from 90 to 100% similar, but that doesn't mean it's always right. It could be a short item description or something. And so we could be giving them a little bit of false information they have to sift through. So yeah, I mean, it's 4 to 5, maybe 6 more steps than they're actually used to for the e-commerce space, but it's data they've never had before, ever. And so it kind of outweighs it currently, but that's why we really need to push to getting this data inside of an item catalog, so that when they come in Shiny, we can recommend, hey, give us 2 things and we can set up the top item in your market with the supplier, and that's it. Instead of, oh, here you found your item, go to this tool, set it up in the item process, go to this tool, add the supplier to our area, go to this tool, order some inventory for it. You know, it's becoming a little bit mundane. So.
Thank you. I know we have people on the Data Science Hangout from so many different like sizes of companies and different industries. And I was just curious, like, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced working at a company as large as Walmart, and how do you overcome that?
There's a lot. So the size of the scale of our organization just in merchandising means that you can't even send a total merchandising communication email. So you need to get the word out. It's not through that. What else are you going to use? So it comes down to a lot of word of mouth. It comes down to a lot of trust coming from the merchants. Even if you send out a mass communication email, you could be in the wrong quarter of planning for them to even look at your e-commerce space. So they don't care at that point, and then they forget about it, and then you need to send something else out again. So a lot of it does come down to, like, we'll do departmental strategy. So we'll go, hey, we've got 55 departments. It's a lot of meetings. But if we can group some of them together, we can make it 20. And then we'll do maybe an hour, hour and a half demo of how you'd actually use the tool, what's coming up next, and then feedback session, just some type of deep dive with them. And then every quarter, like I said, there's the monthly demo from the merchant side. That's the larger format one where all departments are invited to come. They're not forced to come. But yeah, it's just calendar management, being able to say no to certain tasks because you're going to have 300 people ask you about something because you're a SME. And then communications. And communications is always the hardest part, especially if somebody gets a hold of your data asset and starts making somewhat the same tool as you. So then you have to fight for merchants using one tool or the other. So.
Thank you. That's really helpful. A follow-up question that came through about that is, how do you decide what to say no to?
Business prioritization. So since I work on the business side, I don't really operate like tech. It's not like we kind of prioritize our own impact based on current versus long-term strategy. Like if we just decided that we were going to move inventory from all of our fulfillment centers to the store for some reason, then we would need to focus on that first. The business impact is there. If we feel like we don't have the bandwidth right now, we have to turn it down and try to see if somebody else can support it. Otherwise, if we think that it trumps something that we're currently doing, we'll put 1 or 2 people on it, kick it out real fast, as fast as possible, and then go back to focusing on something else. But it always just comes down to like what we think is the most important at that time, which is a very generic answer. You've got like, I don't know, it's not even based on dollar impact. It's maybe you have a data asset that you think is going to be more valuable in the long term. And you've got to work on it now because in next month, if you don't have it by next month, it's going to be a year before the merchants even come back to it again. So it really does come down to like timeline planning, especially at the store side.
Great, thank you. Alexander, I see you just put a question into the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I don't have my camera on. Hi, everybody. I'm Alex. I just wanted to ask, all these apps you create seem really great. And like, honestly, it seems like a lot of work too. So I'm on a pretty small team of data scientists, or kind of aspiring data scientists, I would call us. A lot of us have more of a research background, and we're kind of starting to do a little bit more collaborative coding. But I have found that process to be pretty challenging, even with GitHub. So I'm curious if a lot of this work you're doing, are you working with a team of people on programming? And if so, how do you kind of manage the different pieces of putting together these applications?
Yeah. So the first app I ever built at Walmart was actually in the tax group, and it was full lone wolf. There was no one else on that project. I talked to somebody else on the business side about the current access database that they were using, just so I could port it all over and just strip it from the ground up. So that was full lone wolf. I love building it just because I like the whole process of every part of data. Then now we're working more collaboratively. So actually, I had the privilege of getting my old classmate hired onto our team directly. Me and him just worked side by side. We both did our masters. We both built our first Shiny app together in our master's program. And so he's a lot more back-end focused. He's a lot better at optimization. I'm a lot better at, I guess, like design, UX, and reactivity inside of Shiny, as well as like a little bit more like on the business side. And so we just try to divvy up things that we feel like we can split out. Like I'll build one Shiny module and then he'll work on the back end. And then by the time he's done with the back end, I can pull the table in, modify just the things that I need inside of Shiny. And then that's the full process. We don't do a lot of collaborative things where like he's going into my module specifically while I'm working on it. And then you have to deal with the GitHub like merge and make sure everything actually lines up. So we try to dedicate, this page is mine. I'm gonna do that. You can give me insights on this page, but I'm gonna just own this one. And then that's always gonna be my module. And then will document all of the responsibilities of the data flow inside of, we use Confluence. And then from there, we just always know who's working and owning what.
Well, that's great. And I really like how you bring up the point of like identifying each other's strengths and using that to kind of prioritize who can help with what. So thanks. That's actually really helpful feedback.
Yeah, I will say on the data science side, we used to have a merchant data science group specific to merchandising. That is now upstream, and they're no longer like a pillar. They're horizontal across all of tech technically. But working with them was also a different thing. Like they did also handle most of the, they handle all of modeling, some of the data engineering process, but in the end, all I really needed was their stage table. So they give me a stage table. I put it inside the Shiny app. I collect feedback for their predictions. I send it back to another stage table for them so they can retrain on inside of BigQuery. And then once again, we keep most of our stuff separated. I have some testing scripts to make sure that whenever their final output is overwritten or they append to it, that all the stuff actually checks so that I don't have to go look at it. But that's really all it is testing other people's stuff if you don't own it, and then also testing your own stuff and making sure you own it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Javier, I see you asked a question too, if you want to ask live.
Yeah, sure, thanks. And Alec, hey, nice to finally put a face to a name.
Hey, man.
Yeah, Alec and I have had like a LinkedIn, our Shiny specific relationship the last few years. So anyway, I know you know this, but most of my career was in financial modeling and financial reporting. The last few years, being more specific in data science, I haven't really been working for finance, as a function, although I team with them often. And I guess my question to you is, I've noticed a trend where as more and more viewers get access to an app, there seems to be more and more appetite for finance wanting metrics to align to the official record or the official reports. And it's like, I understand why that is important. But for certain operations or sales teams, they're wanting to kind of splice and dice the data in a way that may not reconcile 100% to finance. I'm just curious if you've run into this and maybe how you've pushed back or kind of gotten around this kind of, hurdle, I guess.
We got lucky. So Walmart organically has decided that finance and merchandising will have different reporting structures. So finance has its own hierarchy for reporting its sales and figures, and then merchandising has its own hierarchy. And so we got really lucky for that. But the way that that use case came about was that on the finance side, they actually have to attribute. We sell things on the app from the store. So it's e-com based, but store fulfilled. Finance has to say everything is coming from the store. You credit the store for it. Merchandising, we want to show that, oh, well, our assortment was actually app initiated through the customer. We're customer based, not finance based. So all of our reporting goes somewhere else. And then we have different channel reporting. So we don't even report the same types of channels that they do. We finally got fully separated from that. In the end, that question still does come up. Finance is going to come back and say, hey, we see that you're reporting on market share. We're trying to report on true market share. How does this kind of differ? Well, when I report on market share, it's based on 29 retailers. I have sample-based retailer knowledge. These are insights we're predicting. They won't ever tie out. And we just have to put forward that use case up front so that if they do ever come with more questions, they already know. The issue that obviously is that on our side, finance is also thousands of people. And so how do you make finance know about all of that? And so I've been trying to create more in-app documentation as to what the scope of the app is going to be now and forever.
Kind of like an FAQ or something as a tab? Yeah.
Yes. So BS4 is making that pretty easy now, since there's the extra nav bar, the secondary sidebar that you can like
the right sidebar, or I think it has a new name now. Yeah. The control bar.
Control bar comes out. There's a learning hub pill, and I do purpose a video, like full end-to-end video of using the application, and then the scope and stuff there, frequently asked questions, whatever else you can do. And then if anybody ever needs anything, go there, learn it. You can come ask me afterwards, but I'm going to point them there first if they haven't looked at it. So.
Thank you. That helps. Yeah.
Thank you. I see Parth asked in the chat, what are the best techniques that optimize the Shiny app while dealing with this huge amount of data?
So once again, I'm lucky because of RStudio Connect. So we have a massive server behind it with high availability and auto scaling. So that typically takes care of concurrency for the most part. Database pool also keeps connections alive for everybody to have pretty seamless experience of connections coming on and off, which doesn't overload our GCP project. Our queries, since we stage a lot of our data up front that we do need, we make sure it's super targeted. Everything's star schema if we can make it. Otherwise, it's filtered specific to a merchant's hierarchy, so queries are really quick. I think the longest query that we actually have running in a production app today takes 8 to 9 seconds. And so we don't deal with query concurrency too terribly. Most of the time, whenever people are making that 9-second query, it's going to pull them back hundreds of thousands of items. So they're going to be looking at that view for a long time. They're not going to be going to another thing. I think it depends on your use case. So one issue we've seen is if you need to make like large input sheet submissions. So what we like to do is there's our hands-on table package. If we require like 20 inputs or something for whatever reason, it's really easy to just record them there. But if you got 3,000 merchants doing a different type of query where it's actually submitting back to the database rather than pulling, it's totally different. You have to handle it differently. And so there has been some challenges with that. I'm still working around what the best practice is for that. I use BQ upload, a BQ upload from the bigger query package for a really fast upload into our table. And then we just try to make sure we partition and cluster anything possible just to make all of our tables run really fast. So it's a lot of thought. It's a lot of design and upfront, like, hey, what can we do to reduce this data scale? Because it's never going to fit in the app if we don't. But eventually we get it small enough that our stuff's targeted. So.
Okay, I've been trying to find the packages and put them in the chat as you mentioned them, but I couldn't find that BQ upload one.
Oh, it's just from Hadley's. Yeah, it's from Hadley's bigger query package.
Okay. So on the topic of finance, I know you have a previous background in accounting, and I'm curious how that has helped in your role and your analytics role now.
I think the accounting principles don't really help me at all anymore. It's more of the fact of like, whenever I was digging for accounting and tax data in the tax department, it exposed me to all of Walmart. So if I was in audit, we get audited on everything, and every state auditor, every local auditor wants to edit or audit Walmart, because if you can even get 1% of that audit as an error, you're going to get a lot of money from us. And so we would be digging. I would just dig and dig and dig and dig all the time through audit principles that way, learned all of the tables. And then whenever I came over to merchandising, it was super easy. I'd already been exposed to most of the tables that we would use in the first place for sales, profits, any type of item availability, discounts are a big one, exempt purchases. So I knew how to pull those out up front, and that makes my analysis cleaner. So just understanding like what you would and wouldn't record through sales or whatever industry it may be, it just makes a lot of my analysis cleaner up front. So I don't have to ask merchants later on if the data's right, and then them tell me I didn't deduct discounts. So I typically think about a lot of those concepts beforehand.
Awesome. And just a reminder, if anyone wants to ask a question live too, feel free to just raise your hand on Zoom as well. Let's see, do we have any other questions over on Slido? I can ask questions. I'm curious, are there people that have started to want to like learn data science now that they've seen some of the apps that you've created?
Yeah, we're actually putting together a different work stream for a POC where we're trying to we're trying to get an intern to do most of the templating of the Shiny app up front. Now that we do have a pretty good structure for BS4 it's really simple just to give them a couple of things. She has experience in R before, and this just gives her another 10 to 13 weeks during her internship to learn more. I think it's really cool once you already have an app like ROM out there where there's true business impact and showing what it can do. People are excited and they want to get into it anyways. So like I said, on our team, we do have a lot of R skills, and we've grown that a little bit organically through our hiring. So we've got 5 to 6 people that are willing to jump in and do R, maybe not Shiny right now, but getting into Markdown. And from Markdown, you get into Flex Dashboard, and then Flex Dashboard, you get into Shiny. So there's kind of a roadmap into getting into that. And in the meantime, they're still building out pipelines and data skills that they need for Shiny. There's been different groups wanting to get on our Connect server for deployment. So that's cool. Plus, the tax still is maintaining some of my apps from a couple of years ago that I'd given them. So it kind of forces them to be inside of our Shiny. So that gives exposure to some of our development teams since they're maintaining it in a central source. And even them, they've enjoyed actually like tweaking old apps and stuff that I've had. So it's just exposure all around to different groups.
Awesome. And I mean, in such a big company too, how do you let people know like what's possible? Like, oh, that you could use this RStudio instance. Like, do you have a group, like a Teams channel or something? Or
yeah, we've got a Teams channel. It's really only for people that have the licenses right now. But most of it does come through demos. And what I like to do now is I'll show ROM and then show them the business case and be like, hey, this is what I've built today, but here's BS4 there's a showcase example or something that the guy has a live Shiny app up on. And you can click through all the components. It's literally just like a testing module of everything in BS4 I'm like, hey, this is what we have today. And then here's everything available that I've not even touched yet that we could do with any other Shiny app. So like social boxes or timelines or stuff that I haven't even incorporated. And so that gives a lot of people like a spinning wheel in their creative space. And they think about the problems that they have and go, oh, wow, like visually, I now understand how I could tie something together like that. It is possible. I've seen it technically be done. Thank you, Javier. That's the perfect. If you want to run that function, you can actually see what I'm talking about. And then if they're like, hey, I want that, he's got the GitHub out there. I Control F, I search for whatever component it is, and it's now going to go in my Shiny app. So it's pretty easy just to walk people through. Here's what we've done and actually has worked. Here's something we could do, and then people just start throwing out ideas for you to work on.
that's great. And those demos, that's just with different teams across the business, or?
Yeah, it depends on who it is. Like if it's on our side, which is like merchant operations and innovation, that'll be more for maybe design teams or central platforms that my work will eventually go into, or if it's something that I need to do, it's features that people are requesting from the merchant side that, hey, is this available? Is this possible? I can show them one way it's possible. Do you like that? Yes or no? If they say yes, then I can start working on it. If not, I'll just start exploring and see if I can find another example and show it to them. But I try to make sure I always give them some type of visual along with some fake data up front, because people like to change their minds once they see data involved. So.
Yeah. I'm curious for people listening in, is Walmart hiring now, or do you have any open analytics roles?
Yeah, there's I know that we're going to be hiring soon on our team for a role. I believe it's the same level as me. There'll be a senior manager 2 role, but I think it's specific to apparel innovation. I'm not sure exactly what it'd be, but it'd be really product based, maybe even more central application, central platform based. I don't know what the requirement is on that yet, but all across Walmart we're hiring. I think there's currently like 40,000 job listings out there for all over the country. And we're getting a lot better about remote work. So we're finally actually saying, hey, we're not even gonna worry about the hubs now, as long as you're close to a hub, fine. And hub being like San Bruno, California, Dallas, Texas, Bentonville, Arkansas, Hoboken, New Jersey, New York, and I forget where else it is. But we're saying like as long as you're within a certain, like I think it's like 300 or something miles, that would be okay with you, so that you can always go into a hub if needed, just fly in or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of things that are out there. It's hard for me to comment on just because there's so much. But if you have a job rec, you can send it to me on LinkedIn. I can actually see who the hiring manager is and see like what type of organization it'd be for, and I can try to help people if y'all find something you're looking for.
That's great. And I'll share your LinkedIn in the chat there too. But Zach, I see you had a question. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Alec.
Hey.
I know that we had actually talked about this like a while ago, but we talked about like production applications and the split between basically like software engineering and data science. And I was curious if you could just expand on that. Like, what does that split look like today? Are you learning anything fun, interesting?
Yeah. So in my case, I guess it depends on when you draw the line for production. So like the audit tracker that's inside of tax, it's been up for 2.5 years now. And I'd almost call it production at this point, even though it's supposed to just be an MVP. My work, I still call an MVP for the Shiny application, because as I give the business what it needs right now, we push stuff up into the systems. And then eventually once the systems are ready, that's when we'll actually bring the full central platform with rest of market ported into it. And so I'll give a lot of my learnings over at that point, and that's when we'll go into like true software engineering and production systems. But in the meantime, they're building other stuff. I'm building something that gives people what they need, and then we'll do a transfer later on.
What is the, I guess, like the collaboration model look like? So how do you essentially like transfer whatever you built to basically someone that's going to recode it?
Yeah, so it depends on like how big the project is. Like in analysis, I did something called unproductive SKUs, so where we're just checking at an item level if something's productive or not. And with that, it was as simple as just sharing a SQL query, giving them some sources, some understanding as to why the logic's there, and then showing them from a UI side how they could actually make it flexible. And that was it. The rest of markets can be a whole different beast because there's so many components to it. But I'm really just going to show them the flow that we're going for, what merchants like and don't like, because I'll have a ton of feedback from merchants about, hey, maybe they hate the app right now. And then I can give those learnings over as UI, UX, design, workflow, data sources, and then hopefully just be able to point them to source systems to build their stuff out. And so by the time we get there, that's really all it should be. They shouldn't even really need much of my SQL at that point.
Sure. Thanks. Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you too, dude.
Thanks, Alec. I know we're right at the top of the hour, but just a quick question. When you say MVP, is that minimum viable? Yep. Okay, yep. My head always goes to like most valuable player there. Well, thank you all so much for joining. And thank you so much, Alec, for sharing your experience and getting to learn from you. I love being able to hear all your shiny stories on LinkedIn too.
Sweet.
I shared your LinkedIn in the chat too. So if anybody wants to connect or has follow-up questions too.
Sweet. Thanks everybody. Thanks for the time.
Thanks all. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.